Hello, everyone. Greetings and welcome. Drop me a note in the chat. Make sure that y'all can hear me. Pull up my notes. Hello. Hi, everybody. Greetings. My name is Deanna Sophia, and I welcome you tonight to my first of 4 talks that I'm giving on the foundations of mindfulness. Good, you can hear me. And tonight we're talking about mindfulness of the body. May is Mental Health Awareness Month, and I have been training in mindfulness meditation teaching certification for a little over a year. It's a 2-year program. And tonight I'm calling in from the lands of the Osage Nation, the Illini peoples, and the Missouri peoples, past and present. And I totally invite you to drop into the chat if you know the traditional lands that you are from. I would love to know where everybody is tuning in from. Thank you to those of you that have dropped that into the chat already. And yeah, so tonight I am doing my first talk ever live about mindfulness. I'm going to be teaching next month, starting June 7th, about the foundations of mindfulness, just an introductory mindfulness course. And so I put this together as a way to kind of introduce it, talk a little bit about it so folks can understand a little more about it before you jump into just learning the thing. So let's see. If you have found this after the broadcast, thank you for showing up. Definitely check into the other videos that I'm doing later in the month. I'm doing one each Tuesday of this month. And the second one will be mindfulness of the emotions. Third will be mindfulness of thoughts. Fourth will be how mindfulness supports trauma recovery. I am a very big proponent of doing trauma sensitive mindfulness. I am a trauma survivor myself. And so a lot of the things that I've learned and put into practice are things that can support that. And actually we have different ways of working with mindfulness, different variations, because there's a lot that can go into it. So I'm going to jump into talking about the meat of mindfulness of the body and the breath, which is the very first foundation of mindfulness. It actually supports kind of all of the rest of the foundations of mindfulness. And it's a practice of consciously tuning in elements of our awareness, just our knowingness, just our being present to the experience of the present moment. And it very much helps us, assist us to recalibrate the body and the mind. We establish a connection with the body and with the breath first because that's our anchor of awareness. So we are going to firstly establish that, yes, we have a body, we can sense it, we can feel it, we know where we are in the present moment, we can sense our breath, we can tell that we are breathing, breath is life. Starting from there, then we begin the rest of our meditation. So it helps us, as we establish an anchor with our body and a breath, cultivate this place of awareness, this place to kind of rest our awareness, as it were. And rest is a word that I'll kind of talk about a little bit later. But we're human beings. We have any of our 5 senses that are available to us experiencing the world. And, resting in our 5 senses and resting in stillness seems like a simple task, but it's actually very difficult, especially in the world that we live in, as you all probably know. We live in a world that runs 24/7. We live in a world that runs at the speed of light, at the speed of conflict, at the speed of self-doubt and illness and oppression and too many things that we could get into at this moment that actually take us away from our connection with our body. So it actually takes practice to achieve stillness. And it's the kind of stillness that our body actually needs to not just for our overall well-being, but for our survival. So we're going to take a moment right now, as I'm talking with you, to pause. And I want you to sense where you are in your body here with me on the YouTube. So you can take a moment to sense where your body is in contact with the surface that you're sitting on. Perhaps it's your sits bones. You might feel your feet on the floor. You might be able to sense the extraneous sounds in the room around you. Sense if you can feel the air on your skin, the breath in your body. See if you can follow that breath. See if you can Sense it as it comes in at the tips of your nose and at the top of your lip. And see if you can sense when you take a deep breath where that travels down with. And see if you can follow it. Just a little bit of mindfulness practice to kind of get us going. Just a little taste to kind of understand what this whole mindfulness practice is. So we're going to talk just a moment again about how and why establishing a mindfulness practice, especially of the body and the breath, can be difficult, especially if you are someone who has never really connected with your body before. Socially, our world doesn't really encourage us to take care of ourselves. Jobs are more and more demanding every day for lots of systemic reasons. Or you might be somebody that has kids. You might be a caregiver yourself. Or you could be somebody that has experienced things in your life that make being in your body uncomfortable or unsafe or unwelcome. It's very real stuff. So I'm not going to get too much into that, because if I did, we would actually be working outside of our grounded awareness of the body. So the point I'm making is it's really freaking hard. And that's why mindfulness is a practice. It's one that we definitely have to practice a lot to get the benefits of it. But it is that kind of way of having ourself at the end of the day, really the hardest days that are out there these days. So that's also why it is really important to practice with a coach or a guide that is trained to understand what's the safest way to do this. Because there is a very clear definition between mindfulness of the body and the breath and re-traumatization. Can confirm. So I work in the understanding as a trauma-sensitive mindfulness coach that most folks have experienced illness or oppression in their lives, or trauma. And if you're somebody that hasn't experienced some of that, you might be somebody that has experienced great big grief or loss or self-doubt or shame or rage. Can confirm too. There are any number of causes and conditions that can contribute to human beings feeling like we have a really hard time belonging to our own body. And these things are things that are likely going to come up in meditation. And that's because when we start moving half as fast, we start noticing twice as much. And so that's kind of why mindfulness is very much like that dial. We practice other things to bring into our awareness and rest our awareness with, because, as a trained guide, we need to know when someone needs to practice applying self-love and compassion. Sometimes we need to sense when we need to work within our window of tolerance, which is the space between hypoarousal and hyperarousal. So it's the space in between that where we have a grounded access to our cognitive reasoning and processing center. We can't really do any healing outside of that window. So that is the window that we mostly want to stay in. And it's also just, you need someone who knows when it's skillful to just pause and reconnect with the body, reconnect with the breath, because you really need that grounded presence to be in the here and the now that is very difficult to be with sometimes. When I first started practicing meditation, a little bit about myself, my body was actually not safe to practice in. And I had a very rough time practicing with my breath. It was not very accessible to me. I am somebody who has had lifelong anxiety. Can confirm it's present today. I'm also somebody that has had debilitating panic attacks in the past, among other things. And I tried lots of different kinds of meditation and practices, and I ended up really establishing my own home practice virtually with who is now my meditation teacher, Tara Brock. And I found trauma-sensitive mindfulness meditation that included the variations that made it safe for me to practice with my body and with my breath and everything that was going on in my experience. So I kind of needed to build up those meditation muscles, if you will. I had a very dysregulated nervous system response, and I vacillated between either hypoarousal or hyperarousal. So either flight or fight or freeze. That's a very wildly swinging pendulum there. So I had to first practice getting that pendulum to swing less, bit by bit, practicing stillness. Because we live in a world that labels us as workers, consumers, users, patients, creators, bosses, sons, daughters, sisters, siblings, victims, perpetrators, all kinds of labels that are with us in our mind. So, and to make things go in our world, we have to constantly produce. And to make things better in our world, we have to constantly fix. So mindfulness meditation is the practice of not doing those things, not fixing, not solving, not planning, not rehearsing, not ruminating in our head, not doing the things in our head and not using our body. So we take that moment, that pause to check in with our body and find out what it has to say too. Mindfulness of the body and the breath is the first foundation of mindfulness because it helps us cultivate our stillness to pause. And inviting stillness allows us to practice paying attention to the felt sense of how we're doing in our body. Because our body has this intelligence too. The mind just tends to get credit all of the time because the mind is doing the talking all of the time. So allowing our body to communicate with us too helps us nurture our well-being in the long run. So practicing mindfulness of the body and the breath helps guide us through learning to pay attention to our inner experience. The subtle cues that come up in our body, the language that our body, our specific body, speaks to us. These are all too important tiny guideposts, especially on a healing journey. And the brain tends to be on autopilot a lot. It is in that produce, fix mode, and the body can actually get neglected in that. So practicing active, receptive stillness interrupts that trance of autopilot. Mindfulness of the body and the breath is deliberately pressing pause regularly, consistently. So our whole system gets a pause, our whole body. Our whole body actually supports our mind. Our body supports our mental efforts. It supports our emotional efforts. It supports our family and our community connections. The body is the work that does the physical expressions of love and care to ourselves and to those we care about. And your body's immune system, like all of our communities, actually work better when they're cared for. So stillness actually becomes a radical act of self and thus community care. Knowing that your life matters, your body matters, your mind matters, your emotions matter, your experiences matter. And all of that is interlaced with the people around you, your family who you love, your chosen family, your friends, your job, the service clerk at the gas station that you inadvertently went off on at the end of your really bad day. You can have mindfulness about that because that person didn't probably need that in their day. We certainly didn't need that in our day. So none of us are separate from the actual system out there that supports us. We are a part of those systems too. So mindfulness of the body and the breath is that literal manifest practice of the oxygen mask theory. We have to have ours on first before we can show up for anyone we love. We have to show up for ourselves first. And then we get to show up also for our communities and the earth that supports us too. So finding a rhythm in our day and our week to make it a point to meditate, to be still, is a radical self-care on all of ours and all of our interconnected systems. Finding a rhythm to purposefully rest, recuperate, rejuvenate is radical. It's not easy, and it's actually not super accessible to people who really need it the most. So rest is rest. It's not entertainment. It's not scrolling. Recuperation is what we need to do to heal our body. And that is movement, muscle rubs, stretching, eating for medicine, drinking enough water, getting sunlight, sleep. We're kind of glorified houseplants. And then there's rejuvenation. These are things that we do for wellness of our spirit, the things that we tend to put off when we're in produce, fix mode. These are often somatic things that deal with any of the five senses that we have available to us. So that's stuff like art and music and making things with our hands, spending time with quality loved ones and making collaborative meals. That's rejuvenation. And this is what mindfulness in the body can do to support well-being. It interrupts the times that we inadvertently put ourselves on autopilot and thus neglect the body. Mindfulness of the body and the breath puts you in touch with your nose. So no's get to be loud. Can confirm. If you're someone who's been programmed for a lot of years with yeses, this can be very radical. Mindfulness helps us root out our people-pleasing tendencies. That's the fawn response. It helps us work through ignoring our illness or our disability. It's a flight response. It helps us work through ignoring emotional pain. That's the freeze response. It helps us from staying in harmful environments. That's the fight response. So mindfulness of the body and the breath also puts you more in touch with not just your no's, but your yeses. If you know what your no's are, you know more about what your yeses are. You get to turn your FOMO, fear of missing out, into JOMO, joy of missing out, saying yes to rest. So mindfulness of the body and the breath is a practice in establishing boundaries because you're paying attention to where your breath rests and where it doesn't rest. You're paying attention to what parts ache for overexhaustion. You're paying attention to what parts want to be witnessed in love. And that's why mindfulness meditation is also a compassion practice. It's not just the stillness. It's the active, receptive, resting. It's the practice of loving the parts of you that ache. It's said that mindfulness is one bird with two interconnected wings: awareness and compassion. It's nurturing your own strained system, your physical body, and your sensitive, complex, emotional body. Mindfulness of the body and the breath is the first step on this dial of recalibration with the body and the mind. It supports us understanding the language of our specific body and having a pause to be with that and follow where it goes and allow things to just be without needing to fix it, without needing to judge it, without needing to solve it or run from it or do anything from it. And then it's the practice of learning how to respond to those sensitive and complex parts of ourself in a way that supports our ease and our dignity. It's right for our specific body. It's right for your specific body. So it's responding in a way that increases your agency to yourself, to your voice, to your resiliency, and to your innate power. That is the foundation of mindfulness of the body and mindfulness of the breath. And thank you very much for staying with me on this talk. I'm going to check into the comments here on my screen. We've got folks calling in from St. Louis and Richmond. Hello, hello. And Buck County, PA, which is Lenape land. Hello. Are we running late, or is your computer being weird? Hopefully it's just your computer. Yes to rest. Yes to rest. Cool. Thank you all so much for being here. What kind of questions can I answer? What came up for you? What is a part of mindfulness of the body or the breath that seems tricky for you? Have you ever practiced mindfulness of the body or the breath? Or noticed when mindfulness of the body or the breath could really come into use? Yes, and thank you. Hello, everyone. So in a couple weeks, actually, no, that's next weekend, about a week and a half, I'm actually teaching a class for performers, because as some of you might know, I was a professional performer for about a decade. I've been a performer my whole life, and that's probably a lot of where the anxiety came from. So even as a dancer and a performer, I was really shocked to understand how much of a lack of a connection that I had with my body and my breath. And this practice has been absolutely instrumental into reestablishing that and regaining my agency to be a human that can cope in the world. And then we have a question. I feel like my breath feels too forced or choked up sometimes. Yes, for sure. I have felt that as well. That's probably a moment when things have gotten a little too much for us in our body. So I talked a little bit about the window of tolerance. That is the window that happens, the space between hyper and hypoarousal. So sometimes we can push our edges with that, and we can feel things coming. As an anxiety sufferer myself, and someone that had panic attacks, sometimes paying attention to that and noticing that the breath is going there and doing that, it makes you more choked up and more forced. So that is kind of that moment where we have to reestablish awareness with our body. So when I first started practicing, before my body and my breath were actually safe for me, I practiced with the sounds in the room. So that gave me a kind of spatial awareness. And that's something that I recommend to people who have troubles with anxiety or heavy breathing or forced. Because the point is not really to pay attention to our breath in our body. It's to just notice that it's happening. So if we feel that our breath is getting choked up or forced, we can do things that are somatic for us. So again, establishing, what am I sitting on? What are my feet touching? What are my hands touching? And then seeing if we can rest our awareness with that for a moment, see if that helps us back our breath back down. If that's not working for us and our breath gets a little out of control, it's always okay to stop at that point, because I certainly don't want anybody to practice themselves into a panic attack. I have definitely made that mistake in my past. So folks who say just breathe through it, that's not always the best answer. So hopefully that answered your question. Said, yes, it seems it spirals. Yes, because we're paying too much attention to the breath, where we need to reestablish something else to ground us into the present moment. Because usually, like, if your breath is feeling like it's spiraling, like if it's an anxiety feeling or choked up feeling or a pressure kind of feeling like that, we again then need to establish, where are we in the room? Where are we in the present moment? When we get into the flight response or the fight response, especially, it brings us out of the present moment. So reestablishing, what can I hear? What are 5 things that I can point at in my room? One of my practices that I did when I was experiencing panic attacks was to put my feet on the ground and rub them on the ground. Bonus if I had some carpet, so that it really gave me a sense of like, I'm feeling things with my body. We can also jump up and down a little bit to kind of like jolt things through our body, because it's a nervous system response when our lungs get attached to feelings and emotions. And these are some of the things that I'm going to talk about in the sessions a little bit later. The next session is mindfulness of emotions. So the way that our nervous system works and the way that our brain works, those nervous system responses, the fight, flight, freeze, and fawn, they're really intelligent responses that are there to help protect us. And they often get attached to memories. And then those also get attached to feelings, emotions, smells. So all these things get processed in the same place. So that's why I recommend, if you're feeling that spiral, if you're feeling something that is pushing you out of your window of tolerance, reestablish a body connection. Your hands, your feet. You can put your hand on the back of your neck. You can put your hand on your chest to help yourself know that you're here, and just tell yourself, it's okay. I'm feeling anxiety. This is what's happening. I'm going to ground myself through it as much as I can. Yeah. For me, it's the reminder that I didn't take the time to sit with myself ever. Yeah, physical manifestations of stress are a real thing. Yes, they are. Yes, they are. And I definitely want you to come back for the last talk about how mindfulness supports trauma recovery, because it's all interconnected. So when I coach, I help folks remember these kinds of things, that like, you are specifically in charge of your practice, of knowing what your window of tolerance is. And if it's helpful to establish a practice that has other kinds of sensorial objects, like a favorite bowl of crystals that are your favorite bowls that bring you calm. I practice a lot with a candle, because that candle, it's burning there in reality. It's there, it's living, I can see it, and I can rest my awareness with that, instead of being focused on my being out of my own window of tolerance. Physical manifestations of stress are a real thing. Yeah, because, yeah, it'll just take us right out of our body. And if, building a mindfulness practice definitely doesn't happen overnight. It's not quick. It's not easy. It takes bit by bit. I've been practicing consistently for about 4 years when I really started to find this kind of mindfulness. And sometimes I still have troubles when I meditate, because I have lifelong illnesses that are very real, and we can't just think ourselves better. But I can guarantee that every day that I did choose to sit with myself supports me coping with all of that better. Whereas if I didn't do those things, I wouldn't have some bit of that grounded practice too. So I also recommend finding a space in your time, in your day. Like, you start off small. You can start off with a 5-minute meditation, a 10-minute meditation, 2, 3, 4 times a week, and kind of build it from there. That's kind of how I needed to start approaching it when I did, because again, I had to build up my mindfulness muscles, because just sitting there helped me be in contact and concentrating on what actually wasn't working and all of the things that I needed to do. So practicing with somebody who is trained to guide is also something that can be super helpful for that too. Thank you. You'll be there. Yay. Makes me want to practice more, to have more awareness and open to compassion. Yes, indeed. Yes, indeed. And yeah, that's why mindfulness is the 2 wings of the one bird. It's not just the awareness, it's also compassion. Because if we are just sitting there in awareness, we're actually not being mindful about it, because we're just sitting there and we're thinking and counting all of the things that are wrong. So when we have things that come up in our meditation, we say, oh, that's a thing that sucks. What can I do to love myself more in that moment? What does this part that is feeling pain or suffering need in this moment? And this practice has helped me really check in with myself and ask myself that when I feel that stress, when I feel anxiety, when I have old triggers come up, when I feel those things, I say, what is my body lacking? What is my heart lacking? And, most of the time it's love and connection. And shoot, there are some of you on the screen today that I've reached out to when that's going on. So mindfulness is very much also a community practice, that none of us do this alone. It is not safe to do alone. I definitely recommend doing it with a group and a community. And that is something I'm really hoping to facilitate virtually online and also here in St. Louis, where I live, because, yeah, we need as many healing places and things and environments and people and communities that we can in the world. So, well, friends, helps us be grateful for all the wonderful music. It does. It does. Because when we learn to pay attention, we also like stop for a moment and say, oh, wait, that good thing happened earlier today, too. Like, I practice mindfulness when I sit on my back porch. I'm not thinking about things that I got to do that day. I'm saying, oh my gosh, I saw my first hummingbird of the season. And then I'm there in that present moment with that hummingbird, taking my morning coffee, having my mindful moment, not thinking about my to-do list. The to-do list will come. There are the hours for that. There are purposeful hours for that, and there are purposeful hours for meditation. I hope that answered it all. It looks like we are at 7:31, so we are done with our broadcast. Thank you so much for being here. For my very first broadcast about mindfulness ever, I'm sure there will be lots more in my future. Again, I'm putting these 4 down for Mental Health Awareness Month. Next week is emotions. The week after that is thoughts. And then the 4th week is how mindfulness supports trauma recovery. And again, please come to that one if you have physical illness, chronic illness, mental illness, any of those things, trauma, like please come to that, because there are very important variations that we need to do with our mindfulness practice in order to have mindfulness be supportive of that practice. And I'm someone who can confirm that that is hard and can confirm that that is so worth it. So thank you for joining today. And I'm going to put up my website link at the bottom after this, but you can check me out at deannadanger.com mindfulness. I'm doing these 4 talks. You can also sign up for my introductory to mindfulness class that starts on June 7th and runs Tuesdays in June and July. It's a 6-week course. You can check it all out there. And I even am starting to build up weekly practice sessions. So you can learn the thing and come once a week and practice the thing. It helps to have consistency, helps to have people to practice with, and have a support system with that. So thank you again. May you find ease and dignity and stability in the midst of all of the things that are unfolding through you and around you. Till next time, friends.